So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to another map that we haven't seen in quite a while but has been on the channel before. It was part, I believe, of the first quote-unquote map pack that was released in the patch before the current one, I believe, and this one is LINHIR. So it's going to be another cityscape style map, and once again we're going to be seeing pretty much all of the fighting occur within the walls, so it's going to be pretty violent, going to be pretty quick as well. This is going to be for a cityscape battle, certainly this is going to be quite a short affair, but that's somewhat to be expected because it is also a 2v2 rather than the usual setup that we have for such battles. Now, it is also a rather strange one in terms of the setup, but there is actually a reason for why the factions may be aligned like this. The Hobbit folk and the Elves of Imladris are going to be here, of course, in Elven lands, and I guess the West has fallen because Isengard are going to be spearheading an assault, and joining them is going to be, I assume, the Fallen Kingdom now of Arthedain. So Saruman is going to have his wish and the West is going to be under his sway. And I assume this is more of an evacuation than a battle that is intended to come to anything, but will they be able to buy enough time by defeating this first army to allow themselves to evacuate out to the open sea? We shall have to wait and see on that account, but I suppose we'll go through what is the de facto attacking force based on this rather strange little scenario that I've concocted in my head, and that is going to be the Arthedain and Isengard force, starting off with Diego Rio Ramos here, who is playing as Arthedain. Now, of course, we're going to be getting underway immediately, really, because the enemy are right there. Arthedain marksmen should be pretty good in a skirmish fight. Imladris of the Elven factions are still going to have really good high-end archers, but in terms of numbers and their ability to skirmish in that way, Arthedain should still be pretty good against them. The Hobbits can skirmish for sheer numbers, but their armour values may prove to be a little bit of a problem if Arthedain decides to go fully into their skirmishes. But again, I don't think that will be the case based on how close these armies are to one another. Just in behind them, we have the Evendim Spearmen and the Arthedain Pikemen forming up that classic front line that Arthedain can field. It's pretty cheap. It's not going to be the most damaging front line in the world, but it's very difficult to actually batter your way through quickly. The pikes can hold you at arm's length, and the Evendim Spearmen are hardy enough just to keep you at bay, and obviously they also provide an effective screen for arrows for the pikes, which are the main core of that defence. Knights of Illuminus are here. It'll be interesting to see if cavalry such as this can be utilised effectively within a settlement like that. We've seen quite a lot of this lately, where in more tight and constricted maps, people are attempting to use singular or even larger forces of cavalry units to their advantage, and we've seen mixed results so far. The thing that the Knights of the Illuminus have in their favour is that they are incredibly tough. They are the tankiest units of Lance Knights in the game, so that may very well prove to be a bit of a saving grace while they're within the settlement. And also the Hobbits are pretty squishy when it comes to cavalry charges such as this. We've got some more Evendim Spearmen in behind with more pikes, so another phalanx line that Arthedain can deploy forwards. And just in behind them we have the Dunedain Peacekeepers, which, considering the presence of the Hobbits on the field, this is exactly the kind of unit that's going to be very effective against them, because they are light infantry destroyers, really, the Dunedain Peacekeepers, as any upper end axe and shield infantry is going to be. And yeah, the Dunedain Peacekeepers will be pretty good against them. Less so against Imladris, because that armour will be toughened to get through, and the Elves, of course, have got higher stats in general than these Dunedain, but still worth bearing in mind. Wards of the North, the armour-piercing arrows will actually be better placed going after many of the Imladris units, unless they can get something like the Proudfoot Protectors into their view. And then just in behind them we also have the Arthedain Marksmen. So with the de facto attackers already having this high ground here on these walls, it's going to be pretty tough, I'd say, for the defenders to gain too much of a foothold if they decide to move forward and attack into this, especially seeing as Arthedain have got so many pikes, Arthedain Pikemen, and a unit of Illuminus Gate Guards, obviously a higher tier unit of pikes. Now then, we shall move on to the forces of Isengard. Stood right before the Elves, we have the Wound Raider, who is the one who sent me this battle replay, so big thank you to him. The Dunlending Clansmen are right here. They do have the armour upgrade, but that's certainly not going to save them if they decide to go into battle all alone against an Elven front line, regardless of the quality of units that the Elves are bringing to the table. Any of them are going to be enough to easily deal with Dunlending Clansmen such as they are on this front line, especially seeing as the Elven front line there looks a little bit more substantial. We also have another unit of Dunlending Clansmen over here guarding this entrance/exit, perhaps just in case the enemy had cavalry outside the settlement, they could shut that door pretty quickly. The Isengard Ballista is actually in a devastating position. This is going to be something which I think the defenders, as I'm calling them here, although it is more of an even affair, this is something that's really going to be a problem for them. I'm not sure they're going to be able to reconcile this really. I think they're going to have to take cover behind the buildings, and that will inform the shape of their defence somewhat, but yeah, this could be pretty nasty for the forces of Imladris in particular. Uruk-hai infantry and Uruk-hai pikemen, so the Uruk-hai pikemen obviously better than the Arthedain pikemen, but just in general the attackers today are going to have access to really good pikes, certainly in terms of their numbers, which is a quality all of its own. And yeah, it's going to be, as the battle wears on, this is the sort of thing which, again, could be quite difficult for the defenders to deal with. Plenty of Uruk-hai infantry are in here. Also got some Uruk-hai reavers for that armour piercing. The crossbows in close quarters like this, being outranged isn't so much of a problem, and the Isengard armour can come into effect as well should the enemy try to shoot them. So Isengard are pretty ideal for a situation like this, where you don't have to worry about the initial phases, and you just get right down to business, because they've got a lot of good tools at their disposal, really solid infantry and pikes, and then ranged options that pack a good punch as well. Snaga skirmishers, Uruk-hai reavers. He too has got a cavalry unit as well, champions of the White Hand. Can they be utilised effectively? We shall see. I think that will come at the cost of bringing in a unit of really high-end infantry like maybe the Nazkai, because I haven't seen them, so interesting little decision that, but for the most part Isengard's army should be pretty decent. Now then, on to the Elves of Imladris. We have got the God Helene Imladris played by JKL, but he's got some God Helene up here. They've got Silverthorn arrows, and I mean the ballista is in range of them, so they should absolutely try to kill that ballista crew off if they can. Even if it costs the God Helene all their ammunition, it's worth it to stop Isengard from laying waste to your front lines down on the streets. And ultimately the God Helene is still a very accomplished melee combatant anyway, so you're not going to be losing too much value for having just singled out a unit of artillery crewmen basically. Swords of Rivendell backed up by some Spears of Rivendell, unupgraded as they are, and also a couple of units of Archers of Rivendell as well, so very lightly armoured for Imladris this, but it'll be good against the Dunlanders. They'll struggle a little bit more against the heavier Isengard units. They're going to need a little bit more meat on the bones of this defence if they intend to hold on for too much longer than just a little while. A couple of units of Norotino warriors, a bit better in melee, so they'll be able to help a little bit more so later. A couple more units of Swords of Rivendell are here, ready to meet the advance of the Dunlendings, and over here a couple stronger units. They've still got the Swords of Rivendell and Spears of Rivendell as the setup. They've also got some unupgraded Imladris Guardians in here, which are a fantastic unit of line infantry of course, and also they have a unit of Eldarenway Swordmasters, which in terms of their damage dealing capabilities in melee, probably the single most effective unit we've seen on the field so far. And then a couple of units of Riders of the Broinen and the Gwythi Rockdale. That's a lot of cavalry honestly, and again, we'll see, but considering the Knights of Annúminas are here, the Champions of the White Hand especially are going to be a bit of a problem for units like this if they get caught in melee. We'll have to wait and see, but the Gwythi Rockdale themselves could also lay down a bit of a beating in terms of their charge potential. Then we have Leon, who has got Proudfoot Protectors, going to be hoping to keep Arthedain at bay. Longbottom mob already revealing themselves, going to be throwing their pebbles into the Arthedain front line. Another artillery piece which is put in a pretty dangerous position this for Arthedain. They're going to have to scatter and move forward pretty quickly, otherwise the Gandalf's fireworks, otherwise known as the Watcher really, are going to do a lot of damage to many of Arthedain's units, so that'll be interesting to see how that pans out. Got some Battling Brandybucks, 2 units of them, bit of armour piercing obviously will not go amiss against either of their 2 foes, but more immediately anyway, Arthedain. Got some Bjornings back over here, some Ents as well, so the high ticket units for the Hobbits. The rest of their army almost certainly is going to be hidden here in the dock area. So I suppose without further ado we shall get right on into proceedings here. There is no need to really make a cut here because the Longbottom mob are going to be throwing their pebbles immediately into the Arthedain marksmen, and pretty savage honestly with the armour piercing damage they're capable of dealing. But we are going to go down to half speed because there's going to be an awful lot happening all at once here. You can already see the elves in the distance are moving forward to engage with the Dunlending clansmen, abandoning a defensive position on the streets, but they're going to be able to destroy those militia units from Isengard. Almost said Arthedain, but Arthedain are over here and they're going to do an awful lot of damage right off the bat to this unit of Longbottom mob. Now the Hobbitry in arms are going to move forward. They are an armour-piercing spear, albeit a very low tier one, but it's still not the sort of unit that the Knights of Annúminas are going to want to be involved with too quickly. And here come the Gandalf's fireworks. I'm going to stay over here for this because as much as that charge was pretty effective, this could be where the Hobbits really lay a lot of pain down on Arthedain. They've got this front line of Arthedain pikemen and Evandym spearmen. They've got the slightly higher ticket unit in behind of the Dunedain peacekeepers as well. Any stray shots in the front may also end up hitting the Knights of Annúminas, which will be of great value to the hobbits as well. They really don't want to park the Knights of Illuminus there, because that is exactly where they're going to give even more value to the hobbits. Excuse me, for what they're doing. I really apologise for that sneeze. Whitey Rockdale moving forward, the elves actually occupying this street over here as well. Let's see what's going on over here. I mean, the Dunlending clansmen are very, very quickly being absolutely demolished by the elven infantry, being utterly overwhelmed, as was to be expected, but they are offering a pretty decent distraction for the champions of the White Hands get in behind enemy lines, and again, maybe a little bit more thought on JKL's part was needed. Uruk-hai Crossmen are reloading, the Isengard Ballista is loading as well, because moving forward with all their infantry has left vast cavernous holes in their defence, and now champions of the White Hand, as much as they are taking hits from those God Hellim in behind, they're going to be able to get a charge off into the Archers of Rivendell, and this is bad news already for the de facto defenders. And they need to hope for less of this as the battle wears on, I fear. Uruk-hai Reavers, I mean, also the upshot of this is Isengard's reinforcements can move forward pretty quickly anyway. Ooh. That is, again, a grisly shot right into the centre mass of these units. Yeah, and this is the downside of the elves doing what they were doing. I mean, if it was intentional to utilise the Dunlending clansmen as bait in that way, then it has worked out brilliantly, but JKL has got no one but himself to blame for walking into this. There's cavalry, hammer and anvil charging his positions. There's the ballista, which is laying waste to his positions as well. And ultimately, he's not really gaining an awful lot, because yes, he's going to be able to destroy these Dunlending clansmen, but he's not even gaining any territory, because the Isengard army is going to be able to reinforce the position the Dunlending clansmen were occupying before the elves even get into position. A fortuitous missed shot there from the perspective of the elves. Meanwhile, certainly the Hobbit fireworks, as decent as their first few volleys were, they certainly haven't racked up the kind of value that we've already seen from the Gandalf's fireworks. Arthedain marksmen moving into position on this dock. I assume they're going to try and shoot into the Gandalf's fireworks immediately. I mean, with the support of the pikes as well, I mean, Arthedain may have taken a bit of a beating from the fireworks, but their infantry should still be more than enough to hold against the hobbits anyway. Another volley, and again they're going after the auxiliary units in behind, which they may as well. The camera shake on that piece of artillery is absolutely obnoxious. Arthedain marksmen are up there. One to the north, so Arthedain being more patient. Not going to panic in a situation like this, but so it must be quite disconcerting to be taking that much damage so quickly. Let's go and see what foul fate is befalling the elves. You've got the Riders of the Broinen in here trying to do their thing. There is another route through these streets over here, but Riders of the Broinen are not going to be able to do much against the kind of units they're going into in terms of pikemen. Swords of Rivendell, the Elder Enway sword masters are here, who actually haven't taken much damage at all. The Gwaithir Rockdoor as well, the Uruk-hai infantry struggling a little bit against the elven quality they're being faced with. And there are plenty of elven arrows still doing damage to Isengard, but still, the amount of damage the elven infantry took was pretty severe, so I'm not sure it's going to work out the way they would have hoped. Dunlending clansmen are in behind. Uruk-hai crossmen are going to be kind of difficult to tell how effective they are being. Is this going to be a hit? Yes, it is. Elder Enway swordmasters now are also going to start taking damage. I mean, it is at half speed, so slower reactions are to be expected. Swords of Rivendell moving forward, another unit of them. This unit of Dunlending clansmen is still alive. Again, the numbers Isengard are working with are going to be pretty useful all in their own right, especially if the elves continue to take losses at the rate they are taking them. God Hellim moving into position as well. I mean, it's a pretty chaotic fight this, which tends to favour the evil factions with their higher numbers. And of course with the support that Isengard have as well, it's not too surprising that the elves may very well be struggling quite a lot. I feel as though this battle is going to be less of a close one perhaps and more of a cautionary tale, unless the hobbits can really start making some leeway against Arthedain. Knights of Illuminus blocking the passage of the Riders of the Broinen there, but the Bjorning is going to be catching up to them in due course as well. Hobbitry and arms are there. Dunedain Rangers have revealed themselves, which again, another really good position for the Rangers to be in. Going after the forces down on the ground there. I mean, it is a bit of a lopsided battle in the way that the de facto attackers are able to utilise the walls as such and the defenders are not, but I don't know what the rules of this battle were, but I'm going to assume that the red team didn't have to attack forward in the way they have done. They could have deployed further back instead, and that would have been perfectly valid. I assume, yes, Dunedain Rangers on the other side, the final vestiges of man that have not fallen to darkness, it would seem, but I don't think it's going to be enough on in this situation. The Ents, I mean, Peacekeepers are damaging, but the Ents, with their very high armor values, not exactly the kind of axe you want to be using. You want to be using a two-hander, bringing down living trees. Dunedain Troll Slayers moving forward, so all of the higher end Dunedain now coming out of the woodwork to assist this attack. Those one-way sword masters. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle, so they're still doing well. I mean, something which has gone in Imladris' favour is the fact they've had so many archers means that while their infantry has taken a beating from the ballista, at least it hasn't been their ranged units, and the Isengard attack forward hasn't exactly been the cleanest thing in the world either, with these Uruk-hai pikemen hideously out of formation, and that obviously is going to be to the great benefit of a unit like Elder Runway Swordmasters, who do their killing up close. Snaga skirmishers in behind, launching their javelins into what very little remains of the Elven formation. And over here, where the Uruk-hai are still in very high numbers, they are continuing to press home an advantage. Dunlending clansmen are there, Gwythi Rockdog presumably trying to charge into the exposed sections of the Isengard front line. Still those archers of Rivendell live. What's going on back there? Riders of the Bruinen coming back once again. Snaga skirmishers are hidden, but they will be revealed by those riders soon enough. 21 Riders of the Bruinen trying to get away from the Knights of Numinous, who are going to be better in melee combat than a unit of horse archers, elven or no. Bjornings are over here, fleeing from yet more Arthedain spears. Dunedain Troll Slayers offer a level of damage to Arthedain that the hobbits cannot really achieve themselves. Plenty of range for support coming in now. Here come the Great Eagles, so they were hidden on the outside of the settlement. This is going to be significant. I mean, the last time we saw the Great Eagles, they were able to win the battle, albeit with only one eagle remaining at the end, the closest battle I've ever shown, really. They are going to charge into this unit of Dunedain Peacekeepers, which was being kept in reserve, and that is going to be pretty devastating. But the Great Eagles have now shown themselves, so now the attackers are going to be fully aware of their presence. Dunedain Troll Slayer is going to get into position, presumably to try and do the business. The Great Eagles don't have a melee attack either, only a charge, so there's no benefit to leaving them in melee with anything. Even the lowliest unit would be able to beat them eventually. Meanwhile, Isengard Ballista once again firing into this Elven position. It's proving to be quite a bruising encounter so far, isn't it? Snaga skirmishers also throwing their javelins in. I mean, this is the thing. Norotino warriors out of ammunition, committing themselves to melee. They're pretty good in melee. This is where they can really earn their stripes. That was a really good hit, that. Not only into the Elder Runway Swordmaster, but also into those spears of Rivendell. Norotino warriors moving in, but again, it's only a matter of time really for Isengard. They've taken more losses actually than I would have thought against this Elven defence, considering how it started for the Elves, but Isengard should still be able to press home an advantage and start pushing through the settlement to hunt down the Elven skirmishers that they have not yet engaged. That Gwythi Rockdor has been sat idle for far too long at this point. They need to be taking far more of an active role. Riders of the Bruinen here. Bjornings are also waiting. The Snaga skirmishers were uncovered by the Riders of the Bruinen, but now Uruk-hai pikemen are ready to reinforce. Wardens of the North firing away, as are the Dunedain Rangers. I mean, this is a real problem for the hobbits. Like, they can swarm over a foe, but when they're being held in place and shot like this, it's not really going to end too well for them. I mean, the Ents are in here, but Dunedain Troll Slayer is going to be really good against the Ents. Although they are a little bit battered and bruised at this point, presumably from all the ranged fire they are taking, which is the thing with the hobbits. It's kind of difficult to judge them too early in a situation like this, because so much of their power is bound up in ranged units, and keeping track of all of the damage that they're doing can be a little bit tricky. Turkish hunters with what looks like the recurve bow of a steppe nomad peoples, but such as it is. There goes the Isengard general, killed off by the Elder Runaway Swordmasters, Longbottom Mob, and Hobbitry in Arms pinning yet more Arthedain units in place. Their infantry is struggling, to be fair, Arthedain. Is this the Eagles? Yes. Waiting outside the settlement, the pikemen are going to try and block their advance. They count as cavalry after all, so pikes are going to be a hard counter to the Eagles should they decide to charge forward. The Bjornings are also going to try and find a gap, and they're going to succeed in finding a gap at that. Going to be able to get in behind enemy lines. Interestingly enough, the Numinous Gate Guard is going to allow them to do so. I can only assume that the Bjornings have not been spotted, otherwise they double back pretty quickly to block the Bjornings from doing what they're doing. I don't know how effective the Bjornings is going to be trying to charge uphill into this kind of unit, though. The Warns of the North will be able to withstand a charge, certainly. They're going to try and charge into the rear of the Gate Guards. That is a risky move, but it will connect, and they will do a fair amount of damage right off the bat here. Now the Bjornings need to cycle out. They did a good amount of damage there, though. The unit patrol says surely the Hobbit infantry at this point, you can see it routing, is not long for this world. Riders of the Broinen. Victory seems certain for the Elder Runaway Swordmasters. I find that pretty hard to believe, considering that they are very battered at this point. Ooh, and there goes the Isengard Ballista carving through the God Helene, which I'm surprised this wasn't a target sooner than now, but they are ripping through this high priority target for the Elves. The Gwythi Rockdoor look like they've finally been reactivated. They're going to be able to get in behind enemy lines, but what are they actually going to achieve back here? They managed to charge into the Snaga skirmishers, and they'll do a fair amount of damage to them, but they need to be very, very careful with all of these Uruk-hai pikemen loitering around the place. Try hammer and anviling. We saw this used to pretty good effect for the champions of the White Hand, although they were more of a flash in the pan than I was expecting. They were used effectively to start with, but then less so as the battle has been wearing on. More Elves falling by the wayside, though. Those Snaga are actually routed as a result of that charge, so over 100 Snaga are going to be fleeing from the field. I don't know, it's probably not going to be enough to reverse the course of the fight between Isengard and the Elves. The Elves, all they can really do is pick away at Isengard and hope that the Hobbits are able to secure a decent victory against Arthedain. They did charge into the Dunedain Trollslayers there. This, however, is a really poor idea. I don't know if it was intentional. I think maybe they just got caught, considering the size of the unit and the close proximity of the pikes, but these Numinous Gate Guards are going to be able to do a real number on the Great Eagles, which is unfortunate for them. Good amount of arrow fire coming in here as well, though. Proudfoot Protectors with their bolts. Hard to tell what they're going after. Dunedain Trollslayers doing their bit to help finish off. What remains? Oh yeah, well, armor-piercing arrows as well, so I don't know if the Great Eagles are going to be enough. I mean, if the Hobbits are able to pull off a miraculous victory here, it'll be so Pyrrhic that it doesn't really matter. I do think the attackers are going to be able to carry this advantage forwards throughout the rest of the fight. Proudfoot Protectors continuing to shower their foe in bolts. More arrows raining down on the Great Eagles. Bit of friendly fire probably occurring here, but more value going to be achieved by loosing those arrows than not. Riders of the Broinen still have ammunition apparently, but they've got their swords drawn, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. In comes the Gwythi Rockdoor once more. As they bulldoze through the enemy lances down. I mean, they are going to be able to charge into the rear of these Isengard forces, but they're also now right in the middle of this gang of Uruk-hai. Still some Isengard range support as well, even though the Elves had invested a lot in their range support. As we get into the later game, it would appear that that also is an aspect of war that Isengard seem to be pulling ahead in. Victory seems certain, only a fool could lose this battle. Victory is a distinct possibility. What have we got going on over here? Riders of the Broinen managing to get a charge into the Uruk-hai crossmen, so the Elves are going down swinging. They are continuing to land some decent hits on Isengard, but none of them really enough to make up for the horrendous damage they took early on. Sniper skirmishers are there, Uruk-hai crossbows continuing to lay down support. I'm surprised the Old Runaway Swordmaster's still alive, to be honest with you. There's only 28 of them remaining, but it goes to show the quality of this unit in terms of armour, melee defense, also the damage they've been laying down to some of Isengard's better units of Uruk-hai has continued to be very impressive. Cavalry continuing to move around the outside, still a unit of Archers of Rivendell, got a bit of ammunition. What's going on back here? Routing units perhaps? Yeah, all routing units. And what is going on for the Hobbits' infantry? I mean, Dunedain Rangers are in melee now. There's a singular Ent left alive. The Farmers of Buckland have revealed themselves as well. Probably, well, one of the more savage units of infantry that the Hobbits can bring down in melee. Those scythes are armour piercing. That will be something. Arthedain pikemen moving forwards. Dunedain Trolls are still alive. Only just, but yeah, I suppose Rapid Protectors have taken a lot of damage, certainly, presumably from the Warns of the North, but I mean, whoever wins this fight over here, like I said, going to be a pretty Pyrrhic victory. Maybe if the Hobbits can do so, they can at least meet Isengard in battle to decide the fate of this settlement. Still a Great Eagle left alive. And he is going to charge into the Isengard position. And again, it's going to be pikes, so we're probably seeing the last of the Eagles, to be honest, as soon as any of the Isengard pikemen turn around, which they are doing now. Surely this one's going to be skewered, and there he goes. Uruk-hai crossbows continuing to fire. The Isengard ballista crew is down here now. I'm certain that the Elves will be very pleased that that ballista has finally run its ammunition dry, and the God Helene is still alive, still have a bit of ammunition of their own, so they're going to try and do as much damage to this unit of Uruk-hai pikemen as they possibly can. Going to go up to 1 speed. Archers of Rivendell running. The other unit that's very depleted is still doing its best. Just seeing the collapse of the Elves here, really. The remaining Uruk-hai are going to be able to surge forward and overrun what remains of the Noraturno warriors. The infantry are going to move forward as well. And obviously this means the Hobbits are also going to be living on borrowed time, because as soon as Isengard arrive to reinforce Arthedain, if they haven't killed Arthedain already, they're going to be in real trouble. A singular Ent is not really the level of reinforcements that would be needed to salvage this situation, unfortunately for them. The Warns of the North are moving down here. I mean, it does look as though the Hobbits are actually going to be victorious over here. The Warns of the North, as strong as they are, all they're going to really be able to do is soften the Hobbits up for the Isengard hammer to fall on them. Proudfoot Protectors. Defeat is a distinct possibility for this unit of Arthedain pikemen, with its formation compromised by these Fred Flintstone club-wielding hobbits. Arthedain marksmen on their way down, Proudfoot Protectors continuing to fire into the enemy as they move forward. Are these numbers going to be enough? I mean, like I said, Arthedain could yet pull out a victory here against the hobbits, but I really don't think it's going to matter in the long run because of the engagement that's happening over here. The elves currently being bullied from the field, the God Helene now coming down in melee. This is going to be pretty much the elves' last hurrah in this fight. But unfortunately they're also engaged with pikemen, so it's not going to be a spectacular final effort, unfortunately for them. Uruk-hai crossbows being used as melee combatants. So I mean, Isengard themselves have taken a lot of losses, it's just they never surrendered the momentum they gained very early in this fight. And that will be the reason ultimately for their success. Snaga skirmishers continuing to throw their projectiles, another unit of pikes on the way forward, and a detachment of the Isengard forces already moving across to engage with the hobbits. This unit of Longbottom Mob already routing in the face of the Uruk-hai infantry that have engaged them. The Line Rangers running away from the heavy Uruk-hai infantry. Surely the archers of Rivendell. At this stage, will they rout? They will. The God Helene probably won't. I mean, they're wavering actually, so they may very well do. But yeah, this is the end of the Elves. Isengard claiming victory against them, and surely with that the attackers will also go on to win the battle as a whole. Isengard will arrive before Arthedain is either victorious or fails in their attempt to kill the hobbits entirely. And again, the hobbits also didn't have to deal with the Isengard ballista. They still had to deal with the high ground problem though. They had the artillery advantages over on this side to somewhat even the score there though. Vanderbrass archers getting into melee, pulling out their armour-piercing clubs. Doesn't look as though the Arthedain general is going to last all that much longer. 4 Troll Slayers remain. Still this unit of Proudfoot protectors as well, a unit of Uruk-hai crossbowmen. I mean, of the 2 crossbows, the Proudfoots are actually significantly better in melee because of their pikes, but yeah, it's just going to come down to numbers at this point. The Arthedain general does fall. So that's something they can hold on to. Cold comfort, perhaps, but there it is, nonetheless. Uruk-hai infantry. More infantry and the rest of their force, fresh from defeating the Elves, going to be on the way forward as well. Arthedain pikemen still fighting a tiny fight over here against the unit of Longbottom Mob, and they will be victorious at that. Been having a look at what the... I mean, it's going to be within 10%, which, considering how things were looking earlier on, it has actually proven to be a far closer affair than I thought, and there will be a number of reasons that I think that was the case. We'll go into that on the endgame splash screen, but it is also one of those battles where, despite the fact it was close, it was also never really in doubt after the initial engagements who was going to go on to be victorious in taking LINHIR, and no evacuations from this settlement will be happening. Saruman will be ensuring that none of this quote-unquote free labour will be escaping to the open sea. 1 Arthedain marksman remains. So yeah, I mean, that guy's going to survive regardless of what happens. Yeah, the rest of the Hobbit army is also going to rout here. For the most part, it is Isengard that are left standing on the field with very, very few of conquered Arthedain that are also still standing. Some routing going on from Isengard, but I mean, we're in the final few frames. This is the only thing that remains of the Hobbit army, and it's just some hobbitry and arms. The entry-level spear unit, and surely they will rout. Actually, there is also some Vanderbrass archers over there, but I feel as though we're probably going to see broken and fighting to the death. They're steady, so we're probably going to see an admission of defeat. Or maybe they'll rout instantly as a result of the loss of the general. Yeah, they're shaken. So they will. Broken and fighting to the death. Oh no, it did admit defeat. And there we have it. LINHIR falls. And yeah, like I said, closer battle than I thought it was going to be initially. I think the reasons for that were a couple of things. The high ground that the attackers had available to them, particularly for the ballista but also the Arthedain archers, were always going to be a bit of a challenge for the de facto defenders to overcome here. And they did so, I think, through a number of things. I think Imladris ended up faring better against Isengard than you would have thought possible given those initial spikes of damage they took, was because when they did move forward, they had a lot of infantry right up in Isengard's face immediately, and the Elven infantry is, of course, of good quality. Even though the heavier Isengard units can go toe-to-toe with the lighter Elven units we saw, It's not going to be the sort of thing where Isengard could just batter through them even with the losses the elves had taken. But the elves also invested heavily in their archers, and it can be quite difficult to keep track of how well archers are doing. And I can only assume that Isengard were taking a bit of a beating at the hands of what was, ultimately, 5 units of elven archers, one of which was the God Helene, and the God Helene was not too interested in trying to kill off the ballista crew quickly, so those Silverthorns would have been finding their way into the main body of the Isengard army. Similar story for the Hobbits, only they also had their Watcher that they could lean on, and they also made slightly better use over the long run, I think, of stuff like their Great Eagles. It still didn't pan out as well as they were hoping, I'm sure, but you know, it is what it is. Isengard obviously had by far the most numerous army on the field as well at 3,500, and the elves the smallest, so the kill counts pretty much mirror the sizes of the armies that were on display. So let's see what did the damage for Isengard, shall we? 287 kills on the Isengard ballista, certainly the MVP of their army, I think, because it really softened up the elves to the point where it was always going to be so hard for them to make a decent recovery in this battle. So that is what it is. The rest, some units getting over 100, which against elves is pretty impressive, although some of them were also taking bites out of the hobbits, with the Champions to White Hand being one such unit. Crossbows obviously doing well, another unit where it's hard to keep track of how well they're doing, but based on their position and the elves being where they were, it was obvious the crossbows were going to do pretty well for themselves. The rest of the army, though, the infantry performing in a pretty average manner. The pikes, one of the units of pikes getting 90 is pretty good for a unit like that. But yeah, the infantry was actually not really Isengard's saving grace on this occasion, as we've seen pikes and Uruk-hai infantry be the core of their efforts before. This time around it was their artillery and their crossbows, which is also, to be fair, not unheard of. And yeah, big thank you to the Womb Raider for sending this one in. A big thank you to all 4 players for being a part of this battle replay as well. I've got a few replays I'm going to be making my way through in the coming weeks. I mean, at this point I'm in the middle of recording basically the content that will be coming out in February. I think I've pretty much got most of that month planned out at this point. One such video will potentially, anyway, depending on time constraints, be the top 5 spear infantry for Rise of Mordor, just to continue that little series, keep that ticking over. Plenty of Reforged battles. Already seen one, I believe, for the Last Alliance just before now. There's also a few, or at least one free-for-all. There's also something that I'm going to be trying to do with Kuro and a few others, which we'll see how that pans out. It may have already happened at this point, but you'll know that when you see it. And also a couple of Silmarillion battles, including a new faction. So the development continues apace there as well. So that's really the situation there. Obviously, I will keep everyone appraised of the situation regarding potential new hardware in the spring, and obviously potential upheaval later on in the year with regards to my personal situation. I mean, that's in a significant amount of flux. I can't really say what's going to be going on there or not, what's going to be going on there or not going on there. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, it will be, I'll give the information basically as and when I get it, which I'm not likely to get until, again, later on in February, maybe into March as well. It's all a little bit weird at the moment, but again, that's a problem for another time. For now, business as usual. Big thank you to all the players once again. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.